Okay, everybody, welcome back into my workshop. It is Wednesday, November 11th, 2015. That happens to be Veterans Day in the US. So, happy Veterans Day to everyone, and anyone who is watching this who is serving or has served in the military, thank you very much for your service. I recently picked up a new toy, which is I'm going to be doing a video about later. It's a nice 15-inch thickness planer. Well, it's seen better days. So I have got a lot of work to get that thing cleaned up and running correctly. In order to do that, I kind of need to finish mounting a number of my bench grinders. This one that you're looking at right now is a standard bench or 6-inch bench grinder. Most people will get these from a big box store. I picked this thing up at a rubbish sale for maybe $20. Um, it's actually circa 1983, so it is older than I am, but it still works. For how much longer, I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to be doing a less than permanent mounting on it. With most bench grinders that you're going to be getting your hands on, Um, they usually have a standard two-hole mounting setup that you can use to bolt, directly to a workbench or cart or something. However, if you don't have the space or you don't want this machine permanently mounted to something like that, I know a number of people who take the bench grinder and will mount it to a piece of plywood and then just clamp it onto a bench, which works fairly well for most people. Let's start by taking a look at the underside of this bench grinder to see exactly how it's set up and get the measurements for the hole-to-hole distance. With most commercially available bench grinders, they're going to come with a number of these rubber vibration isolation pads mounted to the bottom. The biggest thing you want to remember when you're mounting a bench grinder is that you do not want to compress the pad all the way to the point where the metal housing is resting hard against your surface. If you do that, it completely negates the purpose of those pads, and the all of the vibrations from the grinder are going to go into your work surface, and it's going to be a lot louder than it should be. So now, with measuring from hole to hole, a lot of people will try to use a ruler and just eyeball the center line of each hole, which you can do. It is usually fairly difficult, and um, most likely you're going to get a decent amount of error in it. So what I usually recommend is go and grab yourself um, your drill bit index and find the correct size drill bit, which happens to fit, nice and snugly the hole that you are measuring through. So now with the drill bit in there, it actually becomes pretty easy to measure the hole center to center distance. What you want to do is you're going to measure from the right side of the drill bit to the right side of the second hole, or the left side of the drill bit to the left side of the center hole. Either way will provide you with the same measurement. So if you're going to use a ruler, you can take it from the right side of the drill bit to the right side of the other hole, and in this case it is about 5 7/8. Now, you can also use a tape measure, hook it on the left side of the hook it to the left side of the drill bit and measure to the left side of the hole. Okay. Now that you've got the center line distance of your holes, you're going to want to start laying out your mounting area. Since I'm mounting it to a bench, and that's going to be fairly hard to see on the hardboard top, I'm just going to use a piece of scrap plywood. So first step is finding the center of your board. This one happens to be 12 1/8 long, so about 6 1/16. Now that you've found the center line of your board, you want to take the hole distance that you measured and divide that in half to center the machine on the mounting board. Since my distance was 5 7/8, half of that is going to be 2 15/16. So, grabbing the 6-inch ruler, I'm going to line up 2 15/16 on the center line, make a mark on one end, then make a mark on the other end. And now these two lines are going to be the distance for distance apart for the holes. Now, when mounting it to whatever workspace you're going to use, the distance from the front of the bench grinder to the edge of the surface can be pretty much whatever you're comfortable with. I usually keep mine, 2 or 3 inches back, just out of personal preference. But again, if you're mounting this to just a spoiler board, you can make it, fairly far away from the edge of that board. And if it becomes an issue, just trim down the board. So for this current demonstration, I've just picked a distance of about 2.5 inches off of the back end to, well, keep moving along. So now we have these two hole locations are where we need to drill for mounting hardware. For mounting hardware, you have a few different options. If you're going into a fairly thick piece of material, 2 or 3 inch thick workbench, you can just use a standard lag screw with a washer. I tend to shy away from them just because I have found that they like to loosen up over time. You can also use what I'm going to use on the bench, which is a standard hex bolt, some washers, and a nylock. This allows plenty of strength. I mean, they're not going to be under that much force. It also allows me to be able to remove the grinder if it breaks and I need to replace it, or if something changes and I don't want to keep it where it is currently mounted. If you decide to mount this to a spoiler board or a temporary kind of base, you can use the hex bolt, but what I would recommend would be using a carriage bolt up from the bottom and countersink it so the head is flat, and then when you put in the carriage bolt, use some two-part epoxy on it to make sure it doesn't come loose. That will allow the board to sit nice and flat on whatever work surface you plan on using without scratching the bottom of it. Um, just a little reminder, whenever you're trying to drill a hole that needs to be fairly precisely located, you are going to want to center punch that hole. This just happens to be a cheap scratch awl, but it works just fine. Um, to line up a center punch, the easiest way I've always found is to hold it off to the side and line it up to make it easier to see, then tilt it up vertically. And it doesn't take much pressure. It's not showing up on camera, but just a little hand pressure will get you a big enough starting point to start most drill bits. Now, if you're just doing the simple hex bolt method, all you need is a clearance drill for whatever bolt you're using. If you're going to do the lag screw, you want to get a drill that is the shaft diameter, so from the inside diameter of the flutes. If you're doing the carriage bolt method, you're going to need one drill for the threaded section of the bolt. In this case, it's a 5/16 18 bolt, so 5/16 drill bit. And then you're going to need another bit for the head diameter of it. This is just shy of 5/8 of an inch, so I'm going to use a 5/8 Forstner bit. You can use a paddle bit as well. I just don't have any. You don't want to use a standard twist drill for that. It won't leave a nice flat bottom hole in there, and it's going to want or have a tendency to run away from you when you're drilling it. Now, to sink the head of the bolt in just enough, I need to go down a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. So, whenever you're drilling something, whenever you have the chance, I recommend using a drill press. It's going to leave you a nicer, straighter, more accurate hole. With tabletops or anything of mounting of that nature, you're going to need to use a hand drill, but for demonstration purposes, since I have one, I will be using a drill press. For again, for the through bolting method, you just have to drill a straight hole clean through. For the carriage bolt method, you're going to want to drill the head countersink first, and then the through hole. Otherwise, you won't be able to have enough material for the head's bit to align around the center. Alright, so before you insert the carriage bolts, you're going to want to mix up some two-part epoxy and place it on the underside of the head. Then straight into the hole you drilled, and with a small hammer, just hammer it down in and let it sit however long the epoxy needs to cure. Alright, I only have one carriage bolt of that particular size, so I'm using a drill bit in the other hole. But if you measured correctly and did your layout nice and precise, everything should line up pretty close. Alright, and there it is, all mounted. Runs nice and smoothly, fairly quiet. Yes, I know, there are no guards around those wheels. That will be another thing I have to make up before I start using these a lot. So I hope you guys found it useful. If you did, please rate, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's something specific you want to see, or a question you have on why I did something one way or another. Probably next week I'm going to try and do one on mounting the that yellow one behind there, which didn't come with any of those vibration feet, and give you some options when that comes around. I hope all of you have a good rest of the week, and whenever you have a chance, go out and make something.